Hello and welcome to Gantt charts. So, building a Gantt chart. We're going to be utilizing teamgantt.com. There are other software available for building Gantt charts, for example, Microsoft Project or other online services. Now, if you're not too sure why you're watching this video, Gantt charts are useful for planning and scheduling projects. They're a visualization tool that allows us to plan and schedule projects. They're going to help us assess how long our project will take. We can determine the resources we need and plan the order in which we want to complete the tasks. And we can do this all visually utilizing the Gantt chart. So this service here is going to allow us to provide us a graphical user interface to build our Gantt chart. So let's log in. I've already signed up. If you haven't already signed up to this service, then click on Create Account. Now, it's likely that you're going to create a new account and it's going to try and take you through a wizard of how to do things, show you some templates and maybe a few videos. If you can, try and skip all that and try and get to the navigation or the dashboard. Now, if you get stuck halfway through, just log out and log back in again. The likelihood that would take you back to the dashboard where I'm going to see you next. Okay, so I'm now logged in. I've been taken to the dashboard. You can see that I've got an existing project here. So if you wanted to get rid of that, well, if I click on the project, go to options and then delete project, I can press OK and that deletes the project. So this is the dashboard or the main area once you've logged in. So let's get started building a simple Gantt chart. So the first thing we're going to create is a new project. So we give the project a name. So I like to think of the name as an aim because I can see the name all the time. So it kind of guides and gives me information and I can just remind myself what the aim of this project is. So we're going to build a cup of tea in this project. Start with a simple project and then we'll complete a second project which kind of scales a little bit more. So we're going to build a cup of tea and we're going to start that project today. So obviously building a cup of tea is only going to take us maybe 10 minutes, but we're going to pretend in this project that it's going to take us a few days to complete. So we're going to use a blank project and we're going to define the days of the week we are going to do this project. So if, for example, you're working in an organization, you want to use a Gantt chart, maybe you only work Monday or Friday, maybe it's a project that you only do on a Monday and Tuesday, or maybe it's a personal project you work on every single day. So you can define what days you want to do this project on or what days you want to allocate to this project. So once you've configured that, we're now going to create a new project. So we're presented with this video. We can just skip that video, continue to the project, and here we are in the main interface. Okay, so there's two parts here that I'm interested in to begin with. This section here where I can list the tasks I want to complete, and on the right hand side the length of time that I'm going to allocate to that task. So this is a group of tasks, so I'm going to name this make a cup of tea. So that's the name of this group of tasks. Now I'm going to define some tasks within this area. So if I just delete this one here, you'll notice that this disappears, but that's okay. I'm going to press task, and the first task I'm going to do is boil the water. Of course, now I'm going to put tea bag in cup and then put the milk in cup and so on. So once you've got some tasks, what I can now do is assign a length of time for it. Obviously in this instance I'm defining tasks per day, so there is an option here for hours per day or to set up the hours per day, but let's just concentrate on some of the basics here. So I'm going to start this project. This is when it starts on the 2nd. That's what we've defined in the when we built the project initially. So This is going to take around about a day to complete. Notice that now the whole length of time of the project is denoted by this grey item. It's 1 day. If I now define the length of time for this part of the project or this task, you can see now the length of the project increases, or the length of this section of the project is lengthened, and then the last task is going to take a day. There we go. So there we have it. So there's a simple project timeline. We've got, in this case, my aim, and then this project has one section, just make a cup of tea, and these are the tasks that I need to complete this section. Now, of course, I can expand upon these by dragging and releasing, and you can see that the project now spans over 5 days. So this is the basic concept of a Gantt chart. I define sections of my project, which might be objectives of the project. I can then define the tasks in these objectives that I want to complete, and then I can define the length of time I want to do those. Now, if I had multiple people in this project, I can also assign activities to people. So if there are multiple users, I can set up multiple users and define who does what at what time. So I can plan people's working week based upon the amount of hours that they complete a week, and so on. But in simplistic terms, this is what we're doing in a Gantt chart, defining tasks and then assigning lengths of time. So we can see what we're doing and when we're doing it. So what we might also include is a milestone. So this milestone here might be drink tea. So this milestone will represent something important in this project. So this might be a meeting at the end of an objective or a subtask. This might be an activity that has to be completed at this particular time. But generally, a milestone is a task with 0 duration. It will appear on your Gantt chart as a milestone symbol, like you see here. And milestones are generally used to indicate, like I said, important dates of the project plan, maybe key events or goals that you want to reach. So for example, here we know that on this Wednesday, our milestone is to ensure that we're drinking that cup of tea on that day. But like I said, it could be a desired completion date, or it could be a project review meeting. So let's think about building a slightly bigger project. So if I go back to the projects page, and you can see the existing project. So we're just going to build a new project, and you'll notice that you are limited to how many projects you can make with a free account. So just go back and you'll need to delete this project and start a new project. So let's build a slightly bigger project. Website, building a website. For example, we can start today and Monday to Friday again. We're going to create a new project and continue to my project. So here with this type of project, for example, there might be some clear objectives that need to be completed in order to meet this, what I'm going to be describing as an aim, building a website. So my first objective, building a website, is going to be to do an analysis. There's going to be an analysis stage. I'm then going to set another group of tasks called design. So I'm going to go through a design phase and do some activities. Obviously, I can't do design until I've completed the analysis. And then another group of tasks I'm going to be called development. So here I'm actually going to code the website, for example. And again, I know that development is after design because I need to design the website first and then develop it. And then I might have a final stage of, for example, testing and deploy. Okay. So I've got my sections in place. I'm just going to delete this task there. So these are my four sections for this project. So now I'm thinking about tasks for each section. So similar to what we did in the first simple example, I'm just going to set up some tasks. So task 1, task 2, and so on. So I'm going to quickly build some more tasks for this project. Okay, so I now have some tasks for this project in place. I can now start to define the lengths of these activities. So now some tasks might start at the same time and are completed at the same time, or some tasks might start just before the other task starts. So those are type of planning considerations that you might need to consider when you're planning. I might also want to include a milestone, a meeting milestone at the end of each phase, for example. So here we're just scaling up really what you're probably already familiar with. So I'm just going to define this now. So obviously at this point, this next phase, I want this next phase to happen after the first phase. So there we go. So we can start to see a clear view of what's going to happen in this project. We're going to start with the analysis phase, complete task 1 and task 2. Task 2 is going to start just before the end of task 1. And then there's going to be a meeting. Now we can assume that if that meeting is successful, then we're going to move on to the design phase and start doing task 1 and task 2 in the design phase. So in a Gantt chart, what else you might see is something called dependencies. So these are normally lines connected from one task to the next. Now dependencies specify the relationship between tasks. So here, although I've already mentioned we can read this as this task needs to be done first, and then you can see this task starts just before this first task ends, we can also make that clearer utilizing dependencies or links between these two tasks. So as I'm suggesting, on the Gantt chart, dependencies appear as lines or links between the two tasks. So if I just move this across here, for example, what I can do is we've got this dot here. If I click on that dot and then, click on the dot and drag down to this box here, we can clearly see now that this item is dependent on this task being completed. So if I just expand this slightly, what we can say now is that we can't have this meeting unless, excuse me. So if I link these by dragging down onto here. So this is clear now. This is saying we can't have this meeting here unless this activity has been completed. So saying that, we now know potentially that, I'll move that there, we now know that there's no point having that meeting or no point doing that task, no point doing this task or starting this task until this has been done. So if I drag this across here, I can now kind of point this here to this task right here. So you can start to see now by utilizing this line, this is the timeline of events. Now it might be, for example, that these tasks happen to depend on this task here. So we can link this task or this milestone to both of these tasks, most definitely. But you can see that these dependency lines, they are specifying the relationships between the tasks, as in this can't start here until this has been done. And it does indicate when the task should begin or end in relation to other tasks. So here is a final view of what this project plan might look like. So we've got 4 clear sections of work that needs to be completed. Now at the end of each section, I might include a milestone meeting. That meeting will just confirm that everything's been done in that task and so on, or sign it off, that work, so that we can move on to the next phase. We can see this timeline of events utilizing these dependency lines, so we can clearly see when something starts and where something ends, and the fact that these are dependent on each other. So this needs to be completed first before we complete this. And you can see that most of my project here depends on the previous activity before moving on to the next task. So that might not always be the case for all tasks. And you can see at the end here, I've got this project meeting, and that's dependent on this being done here. Now, of course, these dependencies mean that if something changes and it takes me longer, then if I move this across here, you'll notice that because I've made dependencies, this meeting milestone is being moved across, because I can't do that meeting until this task is being completed. So there we go. And then the whole project moves across and gets delayed. So we can see how long this project is now going to be delayed by also. So it's a great management tool for your project.